A single spotlight had cut through the dust and landed on me, and in that breath the crowd decided who I was. I heard a boy whisper, "She won't last a minute," and saw a judge look down before my name was even called. I stood there with my white Mustang at my side, bridle hanging on a nail I never planned to touch. What they didn't know sat quiet under his coat and under my ribs. I told myself, don't blink. Let them blink first. The morning had started at Hillstone's back gate where the asphalt ended and the gossip began. I rolled in with a coughing trailer and a list of things that didn't work, pretending the squeaks and rattles were part of the plan. "You sure this is the right event?" a parking attendant had asked, half smile, half pity. "Looks right to me," I had said. My Mustang, Storm, had shifted his weight and blew a slow breath like he understood the joke. From the main barn, clean boots and clean mouths walked past us without looking. A girl with a silver braid had said to her friend, "Back corner is for the charity cases." They laughed like the walls couldn't hear. Inside stall 47, the concrete had been damp and the light had fallen in skinny stripes. I set a bucket down and tested the latch twice. My hand had trembled once and I hid it by smoothing his mane. "We've seen worse," I had told him. He nuzzled my sleeve as if to say, "Name it." I didn't. I had seen sand turned red and tents turned inside out. I had stitched skin in wind that tasted like metal. Today was not that. Today was a ring and a scorecard. I could live with a scorecard. "Whitaker?" a voice had called. I turned. Chuck Redford stood there with his local royalty grin and his son a step behind, mirrored shades catching everything but us. "Thought you sold this place of yours for parts," he had said. "Guess some junk keeps rolling." I waited for the sting to pass and felt none. "We came to ride," I had answered. Travis had looked at Storm and smirked. "Pretty color. Shame about the bones." Storm had flicked an ear, unbothered. I moved a half step between them and my horse. Not a shield, a promise. When they left, Lily had slipped in from the aisle, breath quick. "Grandma, you heard the list. These people don't forget faces." I had tied the lead and leaned on the rail. "Good," I said. "Let them remember the right one." Storm pressed his shoulder to mine, and we stood there, three shadows and a thin slice of light, waiting for a bell I refused to fear. The bell never rang when we expected it. Instead, a young man with a clipboard walked by and paused at our stall like he had stepped in something. "Stall 47, right? You'll need to move your trailer. Sponsors complained about the eyesore." He said it soft like a favor. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "We'll move it after feed." He clicked his pen. "Now would be better." Lily shifted beside me. "We'll move it," she said before I could answer. When he left, she touched my arm. "Save your fight for the ring." I nodded, though the fight already sat warm in my chest. Storm bumped my shoulder with his nose. "Easy," I told him. "We'll give them what they asked for, then we'll give them what they didn't ask for." We rolled the trailer to the far gravel where the ground dipped and puddled. On the way back, a woman with a glossy bay horse looked us over. "Sweet animal," she said, smile thin. "These shows can be hard on sensitive types." I met her eyes. "On all types," I said. She blinked and fussed with her horse's braid. Behind her, Travis laughed with two riders pointing toward our stall. I didn't stare. I fastened our tack trunk and checked Storm's water again. The taste of metal rose in my mouth from memory, not fear. "Lily," I said, "let's walk him." We led Storm to the small warm-up pen behind the western pavilion. No banners. No music. Just dust and breath. I slipped the halter and let the lead hang loose. "You're really going to do it like that?" Lily asked. Her voice held worry and pride in equal measure. "Like we practiced," I said. I stepped left. Storm's shoulder followed a hair. I exhaled. He flowed into a slow circle, ears on me like I was a quiet drum he knew by heart. "Good," I whispered. "Remember the still places." A cough sounded near the fence. An older man had stopped on the path, hat in hand, eyes sharp. He watched 3 breaths too long, then nodded once and moved on. Lily frowned. "Do you know him?" I shook my head. He knew us. When we got back to stall 47, 2 bales of hay sat on our mat that weren't ours. The twine was a different color, tighter, neat like a gift. Lily looked down the aisle. Maybe it was a mix-up. I bent, pressed a flake to my cheek, then to my wrist. "It smelled sweet," she said. I didn't answer. I set the hay aside and opened our own bale, the rough kind that scratched. "Use ours," I said. She watched my face. "You felt something." I met her eyes. I felt a reason to stay awake. Storm blew a short breath, then settled. Far off, a loudspeaker called numbers we didn't own yet. I closed the latch and listened to the barn. Something in there held its breath with us. By morning the barns woke like hives. Voices carried, hoofbeats echoed, and the smell of polish and hay mingled with perfume that didn't belong on a farm. I brushed Storm until the dust lifted in soft clouds, each stroke calming my hands more than his hide. "They're staring again," Lily whispered, standing near the stall door. I didn't look up. "Let them stare. They'll look for another reason soon." She folded her arms, trying to match my stillness, but her eyes darted from one side of the aisle to the other. A groom passed by with a gleaming bay, its legs wrapped in bright white bandages. "That horse cost more than your truck," Travis said as he walked behind, loud enough for everyone. Storm lifted his head but didn't twitch. I felt pride swell under my ribs. He had learned the same silence I carried. "Ignore him," Lily muttered. I smiled faintly. Storm already did. Our practice slot came late. The pen was crowded with riders showing off perfect spins, tails braided, coats shining with oils. I led Storm in quietly, no decoration, no music. A boy near the fence laughed. "Is that a Mustang or a mule?" His friend replied, "Same difference." Lily's jaw clenched. "Do you want me to?" "No," I cut in, taking the rope off. Storm's ears turned back to me. I stepped sideways and he moved with me, each shift a mirror. His hooves landed soft but sure, like he had a map I couldn't see. The laughter died in small pockets. A girl holding a clipboard tilted her head, scribbling notes. When we returned, the hay we had set aside was gone. Only the fresh, neat bales remained, stacked against our door. Lily gasped. "Grandma, someone took it." I crouched, touched the twine of the bale that wasn't ours, and peeled back a flake. A sour note drifted up, faint but sharp enough to sting my throat. I shoved it aside, pulled our own bag of feed from the trunk, and poured into Storm's bucket. "Eat slow," I told him, though he already knew. Lily looked pale. "Do you think they—" I raised a hand. "Don't think. Watch." Her eyes flickered, filling with questions she didn't speak. That night, I sat outside the stall, my back against the rail, Storm's breath steady behind me. From the far end of the barn came laughter, then the clink of bottles. Someone whistled a tune that carried too long in the air. Lily curled on her blanket, whispering, "They'll try again." I kept my eyes on the shadow moving at the corner, not close, not gone either. "Then we'll be ready," I said. Storm shifted once, stamping the ground like he agreed. Show day began with a heat that pressed down even before the sun cleared the roof beams. Dust floated in the aisles like it had been waiting all night. I wiped Storm's coat with a damp rag, more for me than for him. He stood steady, his ears turning each time an announcer's voice echoed from the arena. "Whitaker," a staff boy called, "you're in the midday slot." His tone held no respect, only routine. Lily scribbled it in her notebook, though she didn't need to. Her hands trembled. "We're really doing this," she whispered. I adjusted Storm's lead. "We were always doing this." As we walked him toward the warm-up area, heads turned. People weren't subtle. "That's her?" a woman asked. "The veteran?" another answered. "More like a ghost from the back barns." I kept my eyes forward, Storm's stride slow but even. His tail swished once as if to brush off their words. We reached the gate, where Travis leaned with a grin too wide. "Don't trip on the way in," he said. I paused. "I'll let the horse answer that." His smirk faltered for a second, and that was enough for me. Inside, the arena lights blazed hotter than the sun. The announcer stumbled over my name, flat and uncertain. My boots sank slightly in the dirt. The crowd's murmur swelled and faded. I unclipped the rope, stepped back, and took a breath so deep it hurt. Storm flicked an ear, waiting. I shifted my weight and he moved with me, one step then another. Gasps rippled. No bridle. No saddle. No command but presence. His shoulders curved into a half-pass, smooth as water flowing downhill. I whispered, "Now," and he lifted, front legs curling, hindquarters crouched, holding the levade longer than breath should allow. Silence filled the space, a silence so heavy it bent the air. Phones dropped, lips parted. Even Travis, standing at the gate, leaned forward. When Storm landed, I bowed my head not to the crowd but to him. The applause broke like thunder, rolling uneven, shocked. But before it could carry us, a voice cut through, sharp and certain. "Miss Whitaker," Judge Granger said, rising from his seat. His face unreadable, his tone deliberate. "Do you have registration papers for this horse?" The question fell like a stone in a still pond. My chest tightened. Lily froze by the rail. The arena hushed again, heavier than before. I stepped closer to Storm, laid a hand on his neck, and answered, "No. He was abandoned. I found him near Timber Ravine." He had no brand, no claim. Granger's gaze narrowed, not at me but at Storm's flank. Then he stepped down, boots crunching in the dirt, the crowd parting as though they knew what was coming. He knelt by Storm's side, brushed back a patch of hair, and revealed a crescent birthmark faint but sure. The crowd gasped as one. Granger stood tall, voice carrying. This horse is not just a Mustang. He may be the last of a line thought gone for 20 years. The murmur grew into a storm of whispers, and Storm, calm and still, flicked his tail as if he had been waiting all along. The crowd didn't know what to do with silence that sharp. Whispers darted like birds, Celestia line, military breeding, missing foal. I caught Lily's wide eyes. Her lips shaped words without sound. I steadied her with a look, though my stomach turned. Judge Granger's hand hovered near Storm's shoulder, not touching, only measuring. "Where did you say you found him?" he asked. My voice carried clearer than I felt. "Timber Ravine. 4 years ago. He was skin and bones." A ripple passed through the stands. Someone muttered, "That's where the fire was." Granger's jaw worked as if he held back more than he said. From the far aisle, a man pushed forward. His face was drawn, hair grayer than his years, but his eyes burned with something I hadn't seen in the barns, recognition. He raised a hand. "That mare. Celestia was mine." The name hit like a hammer. The stands erupted in gasps. He swallowed, voice rough. "Redford bought her. Told me she died in a trailer fire. But I never saw her body, never saw the foal." His hand trembled as he pointed at Storm. "Until now." Travis' laugh cut through, high and nervous. "That's a wild Mustang. Some drifter dragged it out of a ditch, dressed it up." But before he could finish, another voice broke in. Cole Anderson, a former stable hand, stepped from the crowd, holding a sealed bag. "Check his feet," he said, steady as stone. He lifted the bag high. "Found chili oil and solvent in it. Sabotage." Lily gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Granger's face darkened. "Who did this?" Cole didn't look at Grace. He looked straight at Travis. "I worked your father's stables. I heard him order men to leave a pregnant mare in that ravine." The arena fell to a hush that felt heavier than any shout. Travis' smirk drained. Chuck Redford shoved through the rail, sneer curling. "You'll regret these lies," he spat, but his voice cracked under the weight of evidence. Granger raised a hand and the silence bent to him. "Enough." He turned back to me. "Miss Whitaker, what you've shown today is not just skill. It's proof of resilience, of truth hidden too long. This horse isn't just a survivor, he's a witness." I pressed a hand to Storm's neck. He stood unshaken, as though the dust and noise had never touched him. Lily's whisper reached my ear. "Grandma, what happens now?" My throat tightened. "Now," I said steady, "we see if justice still remembers how to walk." The crowd leaned closer, waiting for the next breath, the next word, the next crack in the walls of silence. The next breath did not come from me. It came from the stands where Jeremiah Cole, the gaunt man who had named Celestia, pulled a folder from under his coat. His hands shook, but the papers inside were steady. He passed them to Granger. "These are breeding documents, veterinary charts, letters. Dated years back." Granger unfolded one slowly, reading the faded ink. "Celestia," he said, voice low but carrying. "Confirmed. And if these are true, this horse, Storm, is her colt." A ripple of gasps swept the arena. Some leaned forward with wonder, others with envy. I felt my pulse thunder in my ears. Lily clutched my sleeve. "They can't deny this, can they?" I held her hand down gently. "They'll try." Chuck Redford's boots scraped across the dirt as he lunged forward. "Forgery. That mare died in my trailer." His words tangled in the noise. Granger cut him short, steel in his voice. "You said she died. But here he stands." He gestured at Storm, who hadn't flinched once. Storm only turned his head toward the noise, eyes calm, ears forward like a sentinel. Travis tried to recover his grin, but his lips betrayed a twitch. "Even if it's true, he's worthless without papers." Cole Anderson held up the bag of tainted feed. "Worthless enough for someone to poison?" His words silenced the rest. For a moment, only the shuffle of hooves and the thud of my own heart filled the space. Granger spoke again, deliberate. "Redford Estate will answer to this. Suspension effective immediately, pending investigation." The crowd erupted, not in chaos but in relief, in something that sounded close to justice. Applause rose, uneven, not for trophies but for truth revealed. I laid a hand on Storm's mane. His warmth steadied me. He lowered his head slightly, almost a bow, and I whispered so only he could hear, You've carried more than any horse should, and today you carried me too. When the dust settled, Jeremiah stepped close. His eyes brimmed, but he kept his voice plain. They always said the colt would be exceptional. He paused, looking at Storm. Turns out he just needed the right fight. I nodded once, not in triumph but in understanding. Lily squeezed my hand. Grandma, we did it. I shook my head softly. No, Lily. You did it. We only gave him the chance. And as the crowd thinned and the banners came down, I realized this was never about ribbons or applause. It was about truth finally breathing air after years buried in dust. Long after the arena emptied, the barn still hummed with uneasy quiet. Some riders walked past without meeting my eyes, their polished boots clicking sharper than before. Others nodded once, reluctant but real, like respect had found its way through cracks they couldn't patch. Lily trailed beside me, clutching her notebook tight to her chest though she hadn't written a word since the performance. They looked at him different, she whispered. Like he turned into someone else out there. I stroked Storm's neck as we reached stall 47. He didn't turn into someone else, I said softly. He showed them who he always was. Inside the stall, Storm shook out his mane and stood tall, though the day had worn him. I laid fresh bedding, checked the water, and listened. Beyond the barn wall, laughter still drifted from the Redford camp, forced and bitter now. Lily glanced that way, her jaw tight. They'll try again, she muttered. I nodded. Probably. Her eyes widened. Then what do we do? I crouched, brushing sawdust from my boots. Same as always. Stay awake, stay steady, and trust the horse more than the noise. Later that night, I sat with my back against the stall, the air heavy with hay and sweat. Storm lowered his head over the door, his breath warm on my shoulder. Lily sketched him by lantern light, her pencil scratching fast, urgent, as if afraid the memory might fade. Grandma, she said suddenly, what if Granger was right? What if Storm really is from that secret line? I looked up at the lantern flame. Bloodlines don't make character. Choices do. She hesitated. But if he's theirs, I cut her off gently. He's not theirs. He's ours. They had their chance and they left him to die. We don't belong to people who abandon us. A shuffle outside made Storm snort, ears pricking. I rose quietly, peering through the shadows. A figure lingered too long near the aisle. Then the scrape of a boot and the sound slipped away. I tightened the latch on the stall. They're not finished, I whispered. Lily's hand trembled as she set down her sketch. Will he be safe? She asked. I rested my palm on Storm's shoulder, steadying both of us. As safe as any of us can be when truth is finally awake. Storm shifted, stamping once, sharp and deliberate as if to agree. The barn fell silent, but in that silence I felt it. The past hadn't let go yet. It was moving toward us step by step and we had no choice but to face it. Morning came with a strange stillness as if the whole showground held its breath. Dust motes drifted in beams of sunlight cutting through the slats of the barn roof, slow and heavy like snow that had forgotten how to fall. I sat on an upturned bucket, hands folded, watching Storm chew steadily. He looked worn but unbroken, eyes bright under the dull sheen of fatigue. He's ready, I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I said it for Lily, for myself, or for the horse. Lily appeared with a clipboard hugged to her chest. Midday slot, same as yesterday, she said, voice trembling. She tried to hide the quiver with a small cough. I nodded, smoothing Storm's mane. It's not about the slot. It's about the truth. She frowned. But what if they boo, or what if they don't even watch? I lifted Storm's hoof, checked the sole, then set it down gently. Then we'll ride for the silence. Even silence can carry. Outside, the barns rattled with life, horses stamping, trainers shouting, wheels creaking as rigs moved across gravel. Riders brushed by us with sharp perfumes, their jackets stiff, their saddles polished to blinding shine. I led Storm forward with nothing but the rope resting loose on my fingers. He walked with me, no hesitation, no drag. His hooves echoed steady, louder than the noise around us. Eyes followed again, the same pity, the same disbelief. A woman muttered, "Here comes the ghost show." Another replied, "Better than yesterday, at least we'll have a laugh." We reached the gate. The announcer fumbled my name once more, almost choking on it. The crowd barely stirred. I stood still, lifted the rope from Storm's head and let it fall to the dirt. Gasps rustled. Someone hissed, "No bridle again? She'll lose control." My chest tightened but I held my ground. I shifted my weight, breathed deep, and Storm moved like he'd been waiting. Step by step his body mirrored mine. He spun with grace, paused, then lifted into a levade, front legs curling, holding, long enough for doubt to collapse in the crowd's throat. The hush was deeper than applause. Even the judge's pen stilled mid-note. Then Thomas Granger's voice carried across the arena, calm but sharp. "Miss Whitaker." I turned, hand still on Storm. "Yes." He leaned forward. "Do you understand what this horse is? What it means?" His gaze pierced not me but the mark on Storm's flank, the faint crescent shining under the light. Whispers climbed like ivy through the stands. Lily clutched the railing, whispering, "Grandma, they know now." I steadied my hand on Storm's neck. "Then let them know," I said, my voice steady, though my knees quivered under the weight of it. Storm flicked his tail once, unbothered, as if he'd been carrying this secret all along, waiting for the right soil to finally grow it into truth. The air felt different in the arena now, like everything had shifted but hadn't yet settled. The crowd, who had once looked at us with sneers and whispers, now sat quietly, absorbing the weight of what had just unfolded. Their eyes followed Storm as if he had become something else, a living testament to survival, to something forgotten and buried deep in the past. Granger stood still, the silence between us stretching too long, too thick. His eyes never left Storm's flank, where the birthmark glinted under the bright lights. "That mark," he finally spoke, voice steady but full of something unspoken, "it belongs to a bloodline thought to be lost. Celestia's line." He looked at me then as if for the first time seeing me, not just as a woman who had entered a competition with a scruffy Mustang, but as something more. "You knew," he said. It wasn't a question but a realization. I didn't respond at first. Instead, I turned my gaze to Storm, who stood still as stone, as if he too understood the gravity of the moment. "I didn't know," I finally said, my voice firm but quiet. "I found him. That's all." He didn't need papers to prove his worth. Behind me, I could hear the faint murmur of conversation building again, but it was no longer laced with ridicule. This time it was full of awe, confusion, and curiosity. I could feel the tide turning. Travis Redford's face twisted, his earlier bravado gone, replaced with something like fear or uncertainty. He stepped back from the rail, muttering something under his breath, but the words were lost in the heavy air. Granger turned to the crowd. "This is no longer a competition," he said, voice carrying. "This is a revelation. A moment for the truth to stand." His eyes met mine once more. "What this horse represents is bigger than ribbons. It's about what we choose to ignore and what we choose to face. His lineage, his survival, is a story that cannot be silenced." I stood still, feeling the weight of his words, but in my chest, there was something lighter now, an unburdened breath. Granger's words felt like the first clear breath after years of smoke-filled air. Storm had always been more than just a horse to me, more than the Mustang they had all written off. He had carried more than just his weight. He carried memories, secrets, a lineage that none of us could have known. The crowd shifted, unsure of how to respond. Some still clung to disbelief, while others whispered with wonder, eyes widening as they began to see what had been right in front of them all along. Granger's gaze softened slightly as he moved away from the center, allowing the weight of the moment to settle on us, on me, on Storm. Lily appeared at my side, her eyes full of quiet questions, but also a recognition. Something had changed in her too. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you think they'll let us stay?" Her voice held a tremor of hope, but also of fear, the fear of losing something she had just begun to understand. "We're already here," I said, turning back to her. "And we're not going anywhere." I turned to Storm, who stood calm and steady as if he had known this all along. We had both fought in different ways in different times, but together we had come here. And now we would leave with more than a ribbon or a prize. We would leave with the kind of peace that only truth could bring. As we made our way back to stall 47, the world outside still buzzed with voices, but inside it was just us. Me, Lily, and the Mustang who had always known how to carry the weight of the past and the promise of the future. And in that quiet, there was a comfort, a certainty that the fight was never really over. It was simply a moment of reckoning, and for once I felt ready to face it. Justice, it seemed, had finally learned how to walk again. And it was carrying us. The sun hung low as we returned to the barn, the weight of the day still lingering on our shoulders. There were no more whispers in the aisles, no more looks of mockery or pity. Even the horses seemed to sense the shift in the air, their quiet breaths filling the spaces between us as we led Storm back to his stall. I could hear the soft clink of his hooves on the gravel, steady and sure. The world outside was still moving, but it felt like a distant hum now, something that had lost its hold over us. Inside the stall, Lily set her notebook down, her fingers still gripping the edge like it might slip away. She watched Storm, who was now picking at his hay with the same calm patience he'd shown throughout the whole ordeal. "Grandma, do you think we're really safe now?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. I leaned against the wooden frame of the stall, looking at Storm as he ate. "Safe," I repeated, turning the word over in my mind. Safe is just a place you make for yourself. It's not about the barns or the showgrounds or even the people watching. It's about what you choose to carry with you. I watched her closely, feeling the weight of the years pressing in, not as a burden but as a reminder. Storm didn't need anyone's approval. He never did. And neither do we. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the Mustang. "But what about Redford? What about them?" she asked, her voice thick with concern. I could feel the uncertainty rising in her again. "They'll try something," I said, straightening up and walking over to Storm's side. He lifted his head, sensing the change in my posture. "But they don't have the strength for a fight they've already lost. And we're not going anywhere. Not anymore." The evening came quietly, with only the soft murmur of the other horses in the barn and the faint creak of the rafters above. As I sat down beside the stall, watching Storm settle onto his bedding, I felt the weight of the past few days finally start to lift. The storm inside me, the one I had carried for so long, was calming. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the steady sound of breathing, my own and his. Lily sat next to me, her sketchbook still resting on her lap. "Grandma, do you think we've really changed things here?" Her voice had a note of hope, but it was tentative, like she was still waiting for the world to show its true face. I reached over and patted her hand. "The world doesn't need to change. It just needs to listen. Storm spoke for us today. And maybe that's all we ever needed." I leaned back against the stall wall, letting the peace of the barn settle over me. The show, the crowds, the tension, it had all melted away into the quiet comfort of the evening. We hadn't come here to prove anything. We had come here to be seen. To stand not just in front of the judges or the audience but in front of ourselves. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were finally being seen for who we were. Not just survivors. Not just veterans or Mustangs or abandoned souls. We were simply here. And in that stillness, there was something beautiful about that truth. Storm let out a long breath and lowered his head to the ground, finally resting. I sat quietly beside him, watching the shadows stretch long across the barn floor. The world outside would turn again tomorrow, but for now we were enough. Just the three of us, standing in the quiet truth of the night. And I knew deep down that was all we'd ever need. By the time dawn broke the next morning, the showgrounds were already buzzing again. Trailers rattled, horses snorted, and riders polished boots until they gleamed like mirrors. But Stall 47 felt like a different world. The air was lighter somehow, though a thread of unease still wove through it. I leaned on the half door, watching Storm flick his tail and chew hay as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had. Lily rubbed the sleep from her eyes and joined me. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you think they'll still try to push us out?" Her voice was thin, full of both fear and curiosity. I didn't look away from Storm. "They can try," I said, calm but steady. "But truth has a way of staying even when people want it gone." She thought about that for a moment, her lips pressing together before she nodded. From the far aisle came the sound of boots, heavy, measured. Chuck Redford appeared with his son trailing behind him. His grin was gone, his face set hard like old leather. He stopped a few feet from the stall. "You think you've won something here?" he asked, his voice tight, low enough for only us to hear. I folded my arms, silent. He stepped closer. "That horse is mine by bloodline. Paper or not, he's mine." Storm lifted his head at the sound, ears pinned briefly, then relaxed. I stroked his neck slowly, feeling the muscle shift under my hand. "You left him," I said, finally meeting Chuck's eyes. "You left both of us. That makes him no one's but his own." For a moment, the barn stilled. Travis shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Dad, let's go." But Chuck held my gaze, the fire in his eyes flickering with something deeper than anger, fear. Then, with a sharp turn, he walked off, his son scrambling behind. Lily let out the breath she'd been holding. "They'll come back," she said. I nodded. "And we'll still be here." Later, Judge Granger stopped by, his hat tucked under one arm. He studied Storm for a long moment before speaking. "There'll be more questions. More eyes. Some won't like what they saw yesterday." I braced myself, but his next words softened the ground beneath me. "But truth has a way of rooting itself. Don't run from it." He tipped his head slightly and walked away, leaving me with his words lingering like a weight and a promise all at once. That evening, as Lily sketched Storm under the fading light, I realized this wasn't about ribbons or showcases anymore. This was about standing firm against those who wanted silence. About showing that scars didn't mean weakness, they meant survival. Storm lowered his head against my shoulder, warm and steady. I whispered into the quiet barn, "They thought they buried you. But you rose." And in that still moment I knew we had risen too. The final day of the showcase arrived with skies heavy and gray, as if the clouds themselves were deciding whether to break open or hold their weight. The barns buzzed louder than before, not with excitement but with tension. Everyone had heard the whispers, about the poison feed, about Storm's bloodline, about Redford's secrets unraveling in the open. Eyes followed us as Lily and I walked Storm toward the practice ring, but this time there was no laughter, no mocking smiles. There was only silence and curiosity sharp enough to cut. Lily clutched her sketchbook to her chest, her steps quick to match mine. "They're scared of him now," she whispered. I nodded. "Not of him," I said steady. "Of what he proves." Storm walked calm, ears flicking back and forth, taking in every sound without flinching. He was more collected than any horse I'd ever seen, more than I could ever be. As we reached the arena gate, Judge Granger stepped forward, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Whitaker," he said, his voice low enough for only us. "They'll challenge you today. Not just in the ring but outside it. Be ready." I met his eyes. "I've been ready my whole life." He gave a short nod, the kind soldiers used when words weren't enough, then moved aside. When the announcer called our name, the arena hushed in a way I hadn't heard before. No jeers. No laughter. Just waiting. I unclipped the rope and let it fall, brushing my hand down Storm's neck. He snorted once, pawed the dirt, then moved with me into the open space. His steps echoed like drumbeats, steady, certain. We began with the simplest movement, a circle so slow it looked like time itself had thickened. Then a pivot, a glide into a half-pass, each motion guided not by reins but by breath and trust. The crowd leaned forward, spellbound. Lily's hands gripped the rail, her eyes shining. And then, at my smallest shift, Storm lifted again into that levade, stronger, sharper, as if the very earth bowed beneath him. The silence was absolute, the kind of silence people remember longer than any sound. Then, from the judges' table, Granger rose. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying over the stillness, "what you've seen here is not a trick. It is not luck. It is the proof of patience, of scars carried with dignity, of trust stronger than bloodlines or papers." He turned toward me. "Miss Whitaker, this horse has reminded us all today that true worth needs no permission." The arena erupted, not in polite applause but in something deeper, cheers mixed with tears, a release of everything unspoken. I laid my hand against Storm's mane, whispering, "You did it, boy." He blew out a slow breath, calm as ever, as though this was only what he had always meant to do. And in that moment, standing in the middle of the ring with the crowd rising to their feet, I realized it was never about humiliation or pride. It was about letting truth stand on four strong legs and showing the world it had been wrong all along. When the crowd finally settled, the tension shifted into something heavier, almost reverent. People weren't just watching anymore, they were listening. Listening to every sound, every breath, every step Storm took as if the truth itself had hooves. Lily ran to me as I walked him out of the arena, her face bright but wet with tears. "Grandma," she gasped, grabbing my arm, "they love him. They finally see it." I smiled faintly, brushing the dust from my sleeve. "They see him," I said softly. "That's all that ever mattered." But the celebration was short-lived. Near the barn, Chuck Redford waited, his jaw tight, his eyes dark. Travis stood behind him, pale and restless, no longer smirking. Chuck stepped forward, voice low but hard. "This isn't over, Whitaker. That horse is Redford blood, and you can't change it with a sob story." I stopped, Storm at my side, Lily close behind. "You gave him up when you left him to die," I answered. My tone was even, but each word cut like a blade. Chuck's face flushed. "Careful what you say," he spat. "You'll regret it." Storm shifted, stepping once toward him, muscles tense under his coat. I laid a calming hand on his neck. "The only one with regrets here is you," I said. Before Chuck could reply, Judge Granger appeared, papers in hand. His voice carried, drawing nearby riders and grooms to gather. "Evidence is clear. Sabotage was attempted. Bloodlines were hidden. Redford Ranch will face suspension effective immediately, pending full investigation." His words struck like hammers. Murmurs spread fast, the crowd pressing closer. Chuck's lips curled, but his bravado broke when Travis muttered, "Dad, Maybe we should just walk. Chuck glared at me one last time, then turned sharply, shoving past the cluster of onlookers. The barn exhaled with their departure. Lily leaned close, whispering, "We're free now, aren't we?" I looked at Storm, his calm eyes steady, his breath slow. "Freedom isn't something they can give us," I told her. "It's something we've always had." That evening, the barns grew quiet again, banners taken down, applause only a memory. I sat on the porch of our trailer, mug of coffee in my hand, Lily sketching under the fading light. Storm grazed nearby, silver coat catching the last rays of sun. For the first time in years, peace settled into my chest, not fragile but firm. And in that stillness, the moral stood clear. Dignity is not granted by others, it's claimed by standing tall in the truth. Storm had done it in the ring and I had done it by his side. Together we proved that scars are not shame, they are proof of survival. And survival in its purest form is victory.